Oh, baby. Welcome back to another fantastic and super exciting episode of OC and TJ. We're back at it with another division preview. It's number 2 out of 8. And we were actually supposed to start this 5 minutes ago, but we had some technical difficulties, but thankfully we fixed that. So we can actually get right on with the show. It's OC right there. It's my best friend TJ. What's going on, buddy?
Nothing much. A little under the weather, but we're getting through it.
Yeah.
Another Monday out here. But yeah, excited to talk ball for a little bit and get into the AFC South, which is, we're going to talk about it, but in my opinion, one of the most interesting divisions, just because, well, a multitude of factors. But I'm excited to get into it. I know Colin is too, so this should be a fun one.
Yeah, also, I just want to point out, I know that this looks a lot wider than what I'm normally used to when it comes to, the camera, but this is what happens when you go off an iPad because my computer is completely broken, as you know what. So, hopefully we'll get through it. And you're right, the AFC South is definitely going to be one of the more interesting divisions to watch because the quarterbacks are going to be under a huge microscope. And also, I think the coaches are going to be very important to pay attention to because some are in their second year, or two are in their second year. One's in their first year, and the other is trying to make sure they last the fourth. So we got a lot to talk about. So let's just get right into it. Let's go into the Houston Texans, who some might say are the biggest team to fear when it comes to the AFC, and quite possibly the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs when it comes to their three-peat hopes. So, TJ, I'll let you take over the 2 minute drill. Give me your thoughts. Give me your analysis right here.
So I think the big thing with the Texans is the big thing with them is how much difference a year makes. So think about it. They were playing the Colts in a meaningless Week 18 game, and Davis Mills pulls some heroic stuff out, and he wins them that game, essentially losing them the first overall pick that year.
Yep.
And they get the second overall pick. And with that second overall pick, they take C.J. Stroud, and he went on to have a pretty phenomenal rookie season, I'd say. Came in and immediately looked like he was just a pro. Really wasn't a whole big. It took maybe a few weeks for him to settle in, but once he was settled, he was looking like one of the best quarterbacks in football. So, yeah, I don't really think there's much to say there. And then, the emergence of Nico Collins and Tank Dell were huge too, because Nico Collins, he was a good player, but wasn't this borderline all-pro type receiver that he turned into this season. And Tank Dell was having a phenomenal rookie season before his injury. So definitely for this offense, the quarterback and these skill position players, it's looking up. And then, you add Stephon Diggs in a trade with Buffalo that only adds to it. He's definitely, on not in his prime, but he's still a really phenomenal player. He's not getting any better, but he still is a really fantastic player. So it's why not give C.J. Stroud another weapon? And then the depth is crazy too, because you've got Noah Brown, Robert Woods, John Mechie. Those are all solid receivers too. So they got some depth there. The offensive line might be it's probably the biggest weakness of this offense, but that's not. That's not saying much because the offense is really, really good. So yeah, I think this offense is really, really, set for great things with their receiving core. And they also had a Joe Mixon too, who's not anything crazy, but a solid running back. So that should only help if their offensive line continues to grow. The defense is where it gets interesting because there's a lot of guys who are either unproven or kind of just developing, but then you got
Right.
the big passers. You got Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. Those are going to be the bookends. That's where their defensive identity is going to be. So you got them, and then you got role players like Aziz Al-Shire, who actually had a pretty good season last year, and then Christian Harris is okay. Akuda, he was former third overall pick, kind of in the secondary. He's really struggled, but a lot of that's due to injury. I like Petrie. I think he's a solid player. And then obviously Derek Stingley Jr. had a really fantastic year last year in his second season. And, I think the defense has some studs, but, depth could be an issue there. and you want some guys to produce outside of the two edge rushers. So I think this team is pretty stacked on top. Offense has the depth. I think the only thing you have to worry about is like the offensive line maybe and the defensive depth. But even last year, their offensive line was super banged up, and if you got a good quarterback back there, it really doesn't matter. So, and they have one of the best left tackles in football. So I don't really think that's too much of a concern. I think the defense is really where there might be some question marks, but they have two like almost elite edge rushers. So, yeah, this team is stacked. I think that's really all you can say.
I definitely agree. And here's the thing. Technically, the Bengals can be considered the biggest threat to the Chiefs just because Joe Burrow is the only active quarterback to actually beat Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game. But
Right.
I think if there's any team that could steal this conference from them, it's the Houston Texans, and it's for all the reasons you pointed out. CJ Stroud is a freaking bona fide superstar on the rise. They have 3 number 1 receiving options on their offense. You also have an awesome security blanket of Dalton Schultz. They added Joe Mixon, which is a premier running back in this league. O-line definitely gives some concerns, but again, you have Laramie Tunsil, and we saw just last year that Stroud really camouflaged those issues. And the defense has the potential to be a top 10 unit. At least that's my ceiling, because again, like you said, the secondary doesn't really have too many big-time names besides Derek Stingley Jr. and Jalen Petrie, but it's going to have an outstanding front seven. I love D'Amico Ryans. They're definitely going to win the division, in my opinion. And who knows? Maybe the Texans will finally be in the Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history. So I think you nailed it right on the button. And, I mean, when it comes to Super Bowl contention, I think we'll talk about that later down the road. But let me ask this. Who do you think should be the number 1 receiving option when you look at everything that is presented before them?
Ooh, I mean, obviously Diggs is the most proven player, or not being proven. I'd say he's the most like accomplished player. I mean, that's obvious. But he's been playing the longest. I honestly do think it's, he's gonna make a run for the number 1. But I think when you really look at it, it should be Nico, younger, and in my opinion, I think right now he is the better player. I do think they're both, top receivers in this league, but I think Nico Collins is sort of on the rise, whereas Diggs is sort of, I don't even want to say decline, because he's not like, he's still, I feel like decline has like a negative connotation, like he's like not good anymore, but that's like not the case. He's just like, I don't know. But I think Nico Collins is the number 1. Plus, he's already built that chemistry with Stroud, and Diggs is only here for 1 year technically. He's on a 1-year deal. So, just in case he leaves, I feel like you want Collins to be that number 1 just because he is the guy that kind of is the future. Diggs is sort of that guy to like lead them to a Super Bowl this year, or at least try to. But like it's crazy because Tank Dell on a lot of other teams with what he showed last year, like could be a number 1 on a lot of teams. So it is crazy they have 3 number 1s. And I mean, when the Bengals went to the Super Bowl, they had kind of 3 number 1s when you think about it. Like Boyd was like a really good slot, but he could be a number 1 on a lot of teams at that point in his career. So, yeah, I think I would go to Nico Collins just because of the season he had last year. Like, was one of the 5 best receivers in the league last year. So, yeah, I'd probably go with Nico Collins. But, I mean, it's like Stephon Diggs is definitely going to have his big plays, so can't rule him out either.
I agree because I think you got to give your young stars more opportunities. And for a guy like Stephon Diggs, he's going to have to sacrifice a little bit to make sure that he finally gets over the hump and for him to actually achieve those milestones that he hasn't been able to do in Minnesota and in Buffalo, which is win a championship. And we saw with the Rams, Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't the number 1 option. And he was like, if he didn't get hurt, he probably would have won Super Bowl MVP. And Cooper Kupp was the number 1 option at the time. So that's another thing you have to take into account. And you already brought up the Bengals, who, had Tyler Boyd, who had T. Higgins, who was a second-round pick, definitely could have been a first-round pick, and Jamar Chase, who was just an absolute speed demon. So I think, it's Nico Collins because he was one of the best guys in yards after catch. He's someone that can straight down the field. He's an incredible route runner. And it took until his 3rd year for him to really break out and come into his own. So I think, it's got to be Nico Collins. But I think if you do put Stephon Diggs, I don't know how much better this offense will be. And that's not a slight against Stephon Diggs. It's just that you have to, like you said, with Nico Collins and Tank Dell, those are the two guys that you want to give the most attention to. And for a guy like more opportunities to get open and to create space. So that's what I would say. But let's go on the other side of the ball now. Do you think that this defense has what it takes to be the best in the AFC or even the whole NFL?
I'm thinking through the AFC teams. I mean, it's tough because health plays a factor for everyone, but this team's depth on the defense is not particularly great. So I think that may hamstring them, because like the Chiefs are better. I'm just thinking the contenders. The Chiefs have better defense, but I mean honestly, like out of the contenders, like yeah, I think the Texans could, because the Bengals defense isn't very good. The Bills is a big question mark. They have a good front seven, but you know, question marks elsewhere. I'm thinking of the other AFC contenders.
Yeah,
Baltimore is probably better, or I would say they're definitely better. So probably not the best in the AFC. I mean, we're going to talk about the rest of the teams in their division. Best of their division, I definitely think that's a huge possibility. But I don't know. I think their defense is really good, at least like their top end players. But I don't know. I feel like depth might play an issue for them. So I wouldn't say a top defense. But I think they do have the ceiling for it, like you mentioned, with all that talent. Like yeah, they're going to have some really good games against like below or against like just like quarterbacks that aren't elite. But if guys get hurt, like it could become problematic for them. So
yeah,
I'd say definitely a top end unit, but the best, I don't know. I feel like there's definitely some better units out there.
that's fair. That's totally fair. But let's go back to CJ Stroud. Where would you put him on your top quarterbacks list?
Mm. I mean, we talked about Jordan Love last week. I'd say very similar to him. I think they're really kind of in the same tier, because I mean, they had very similar seasons when you think about it. Like very, very similar seasons. Like they were very close statistically, and um, they kind of just play very similar. Like I think Jordan Love, I don't know. I feel like they're both very shifty in the pocket. Jordan Love might be a little more athletic, but honestly, CJ Stroud might be even more like CJ Stroud is athletic in the pocket, whereas Jordan Love like can run better. Um, so I think they both have very similar skill sets. Um, just the ability to make those off platform throws too. So I think they're very similar quarterbacks. So and that being said, I think top 10 Stroud. Like I think probably CJ Stroud right now. Like I think by the end of the season, like if he continues to grow, like we could be seeing him in the top 5, top 3, depending on how good of a season he has and how deep of a playoff run he can make. So, yeah, I think obviously the sky's the limit for CJ Stroud just with his talent, but right now I think I'd put him in the top 10 easily.
I would too, because I mean it's still really early. I know last year it was just flat out phenomenal, but I think now it's not just about winning a playoff game anymore. It's about elevating yourself to a championship caliber status. And I think when you look at when you look at some of the quarterbacks ahead of him, the Mahomes, Lamar, Burrow, Allen, Brock Purdy, even Jalen Hurts, they have at least elevated their teams to conference championship contenders. And while the Texans looked promising last year, you have to at least wait and see for him to at least get to that point. So I think that top 10 is definitely fair right now. Personally, I'd put him at 7 just because we never expected his ascension that early and that quickly. But yeah, I can't really disagree with you at all. So I think that wraps it up on the Houston Texans. I think we got enough on them. Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who definitely had one of the most frustrating collapses in NFL history, going from 8-3 and a clear lead in the division to losing 5 out of their last 6 games to close out the year 9-8 and completely miss the playoffs. It's a team that has talent. It's a team that has good coaching. Yet anytime you watch them, they never really put it together. We saw even when they were winning those games, their offense was hit or miss. The defense was making opportunistic plays, but you knew there were weaknesses that teams could exploit. But let's just start from the quarterback position, because Trevor Lawrence after just 3 seasons and only one playoff victory, has gotten to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, getting paid $50 million a year, which is just freaking absurd for a guy who's average at best, who definitely has a chance to be a lot better this year. I'm not saying that, that narrative won't change at all, but it's just, I feel like the Jaguars were just so desperate to keep him, and I think they rushed the extension talks a little too quickly, and you had to, wait and see what he could do in his 4th year before you could make a true decision. But then again, he already had his 5th-year option picked up, so it was even more confusing. But the offense around him is solid, and they try to build enough talent around him to make sure he progresses and develops well. Travis Etienne is one of the fastest and one of the most electrifying running backs to watch, and he's an awesome dual threat. Christian Kirk has proven to be a solid number 1 option. Evan Ingram has pretty much broke through since he arrived in Jacksonville, and even Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis are supposed to have pretty impactful seasons. So it's not a terrible supporting cast to have, and it has the potential to be a top 10 and top 15 offense. And their offensive line is not terrible either, because Anton Harrison, you have him at right tackle. You got Cam Robinson. They signed Mitch Morse to a 2 to 3 year deal. You got Ezra Cleveland, who they pretty much kept on the books for a few more years. So you have everything stable on the offensive side. But what really caused this collapse, besides the injuries and the turnovers on the offensive side, was the defense completely falling apart, because they had a mini fire sale for a reason, and it was because they just completely fell apart. When Trayvon Walker and Joshua Hines Allen are the only reasons why that unit is staying afloat, that's a problem. And I know they have guys that can get a lot of interceptions and that can create takeaways, but both Darius Williams and Rayshawn Jenkins are gone. And now you're not really starting over from scratch, but you definitely have a new talent that you're assembling. Hopefully Ryan Nielsen does what he did in Atlanta last year and at least makes them a better unit, because this team has talent. I already brought up Allen. I brought up Walker. They signed Eric Armstead. You've got an outstanding linebacking duo of Devin Lloyd and Foyesade Oluokun, who also was with Ryan Nielsen in Atlanta. The problem I have is with their secondary, because I don't think Darnell Savage and Ronald Darby are the 2 offseason additions that are going to take them over the top. I like Tyson Campbell and I like Andre Sisco, but to me, I feel like it's just a defense that can only do but so much. And I think that when it comes to playing against tougher competition, they're going to get exposed. And against the teams that they should beat, they're either going to struggle or they're going to completely fall into a trap and it'll take too late for them to get out of. So I think it'll be a good season for them. I'm not going to say great. It's going to be a long shot for them to make the playoffs just because the conference is so stacked. But, I mean, listen, if they don't do anything this year, then they have a lot of soul searching to do. And that might have to be with Doug Peterson, because if he keeps repeating the same mistakes that he made in Philadelphia, he might not get another head coaching job.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed that. They're a tough team to evaluate just because, it's a big year. I feel like they're, one of the biggest, teams that, I think it's them and, the Jets and the AFC that are yeah, they could make the wild card, but a lot of things have to go right, and a lot of things could definitely go wrong. So, right. Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed that. It's a big prove it years for a lot of people and a lot of people in that organization. So, I mean, yeah, they got to show out this year. It's at least in how they look and not collapsing, So I think I pretty much nailed that.
I don't really think we ever talked about this extension fully on this show. I think we all know TJ's feelings on Trevor Lawrence. He's another Derek Carr. When you saw this extension, what was the first thing that came through your mind?
Well, so it's hard to remember that the quarterback contracts are never yeah, it's would I have given him $55 million? Absolutely not. But I understand as I kind of digest it and I look at this deal more. Every single quarterback contract that's after the Daniel Jones and Baker Mayfield extensions, every single quarterback that gets extended it's just going to be the next one. Next one that gets extended is going to be Tua's going to get 57. Then Dak next year is going to get – Jordan Love's probably going to get 60. And then Dak's going to get 61. And it's just going to keep going up. And then if Caleb's as good, I mean, we're obviously getting ahead of ourselves, but like I'm saying, like the next crop of quarterbacks are going to be pushing the 65. So it's like it's just going to be inevitable. So I just wouldn't have paid him, period. But like if you were going to pay him, like yeah, it's not it. That's what you have to pay. So it's like, it's not that like, I don't really know how to really describe it. It's just like it's the next guys always get paid. So I understand if you're going to pay him, yeah, you had to pay him that much.
Where would you put him on your quarterbacks list? It's a tough one.
Like 18th, 19th.
Really?
I mean, it's all ranges though. Like, I mean,
I'd say I think he's right at 16 because that the potential is still there and that he has a long way to improve and grow. But it's just really he hasn't done enough in the short sample size he has to let you know that he could be something better.
Yeah, I think like 15 to 19 range is like good for him. Like I think that's
and
like I'm not denying the talent. Like he's obviously talented. Like it'd be naive of me to say he's not. The production just hasn't been there with him, and he just like it's the turnovers, like I feel like that's the big thing with him. The turnovers, just like the missed throw. I mean, he's accurate though, so it's not like really an accuracy show. It's just like sometimes like in the big moments, with him, it's really just like he just doesn't produce. So I think that's the big.
I mean, he did have that huge playoff comeback against the Chargers, but then the next round they get exposed against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I mean, he also threw 4 interceptions in the first like half that game. So I mean, that is like, you got to put
3 of them to one player.
Yeah, right. That was Asante. That was Asante Samuel, right?
Asante Samuel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I could see a scenario where he does have a good season. I'm not saying he's not. I think that extension was definitely. I'll say this: it was definitely too early. Like they did it way too early. So like if he had a good season this year, yeah, I would be fine paying him 58 if he had a great season next year. But paying him 55 now just to like save a few million, like I don't know. But they could be right, and he could just have like a huge season, and I wouldn't be shocked because he is a really talented player and has the arm talent and the physicality and the the athleticism. So but right now I think it was definitely a little premature, I'd say.
I agree. And like I said, the reason why they rushed it was because they thought they were going to lose him like a year or two down the line, which is like you have his 5th-year option picked up. Just let him play out his rookie contract and then just head back to the table and see what you have with him. If you keep him, keep him. If you don't, then you can move on from him. And I don't think that the latter was ever going to happen because he's been the best franchise quarterback they've had since Mark Brunell, which isn't really saying much given their short history and their bad one, if you look at what they've been like in the 2010s. But the point is, it's like, yeah, if Trevor Lawrence grows, then yeah, he should get at least somewhere around that range. Not 55, but at least like enough to where like he has financial security throughout the rest of his career. But let me ask you this: do you think that the Jaguars have a shot of making the playoffs? Do you think they're going to make it?
No, I don't. But again, they're a weird team where if like everything could go right, I could see it, but I don't. I think it's difficult with them because that defense, man, is like just not because they have like there's some solid players on there like that have proven themselves like I can never pronounce his name, but Foyesade is like a really good player. And then you got Trayvon Walker, who's like you're still waiting on him to kind of take the leap. He's proven he's like a solid edge player, but I think the secondary is really where the issues are. Like Darby and Cisco and Campbell are really just. I mean, Campbell had a good season 2 years ago, but this past season he was kind of. But I mean, the whole defense. So it's hard to put it on one player, but man, they are hedging their bets on very unproven or players coming off down years. So it's tough with them. They've got Devin Lloyd in the middle, who I'd like a lot. He had a really good season last year compared to his rookie season. So
yeah,
I'm excited to kind of watch this defense, see if a new defensive staff and kind of Trayvon Walker, former number 1 overall pick, can really have this really big career year. So I'm excited to watch it. It's just like, man, that could really be the downfall of this team. But I think personally that's probably why I wouldn't put the players. And also, they're in the AFC. They're in a tough AFC. They're also in a tough division, which we're talking about today. But, like, man, like, a lot of things could go wrong for them. And I think, not an easy schedule either. So I think that kind of plays a part in it. So, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have making the playoffs at this point.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't have them making the playoffs this year just because it's so stacked, and they, to your point, they need everything to go right for them this year, especially on their defense. But I mean, it's a good team. To me, they're going to go 9-8 at best because the offense has plenty of talent. The defense is opportunistic, especially with Joshua Hines Allen, getting that huge contract extension that he deserved.
Oh, I didn't even mention Josh. I didn't even mention Josh Hines Allen. I totally forgot. Yes. I mean, those are the
he
cornerstones.
changed his name, by the way. That's why we said.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. But, yeah, I mean, he's going to be the main reason that defense is intact. So, without him, this would be a rough unit to watch. But he is a premier pass rusher. So, I can't believe I forgot him. But, yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you, brother. All right. Now we're on to the Indianapolis Colts, who were a drop away. Oh, my God. The Indianapolis Colts. They were a drop away from making the playoffs last year, after that heart-crushing loss to the Houston Texans. I don't know why it was weird for me to say that. But anyways, TJ, you're on the clock. 2-minute drill. Fire away.
So, I like this team a lot. They're one of the biggest. I mean, I feel like we said that with the Jaguars. The Jaguars were more like, they're not unknowns, but like it could go either way. Like, they could be really good or be really bad based on like the talent that's already on there. With the Colts, we just don't know. Like, the Colts are just like we can't, like, there are proven players on here, but it all basically relies on Anthony Richardson, who, like, obviously premier talent, but like we just don't know with him. He just hasn't played enough football to be like, yeah, like this Colts team's gonna be really good and also we don't know if he's gonna stay healthy because he took a lot of hits in just the 3 or 4 games he played. So it's like, got to keep that in consideration with the Colts. But if he reaches his peak, I mean, goodness, like he could be like Lamar Jackson-esque, and I think he has a better arm than Lamar Jackson. So watch out for that. And then they also have Jonathan Taylor, who has been injured and is coming off of 2 kind of rough years. But we saw him in 2021 where he looked like the best back in football. So got to keep that in mind as well. Again, we just don't know which Jonathan Taylor we're going to get. Michael Pittman, proven commodity at receiver. And then really love that Adonai Mitchell pick. Getting him in the second round is crazy. I think he's going to be huge there. And they have Josh Downs, who had a really good rookie season as well. The offensive line played much better last year than they did when they had that like really horrific year, the year in 2022. But yeah, the offensive line is kind of, it's not the greatest unit, but it can be serviceable. So I don't think it's a bad unit by any means. But nothing. I mean, Quentin Nelson definitely isn't the player he was in his first few years. He's definitely had like a little bit of a, some hiccups, but you got to hope maybe with a more mobile quarterback that kind of changes and he becomes back to that all-pro form. The defense, I like. I like the defense a lot. Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, and Jay Speed, Zaire Franklin. That's a great front seven. Like, I mean, there's not like DeForest Buckner, was an all-pro, like Pro Bowl type player at some point. I think he's still really good, but they don't have like an elite like top 5 player in their front seven. But overall, that's a really solid unit. Like, in my opinion, I think the secondary is where it gets interesting because you got Julian Blackmon. You got Kenny Moore. Like, those are guys that have shown flashes, but they need some guys to step up here. I think. I think that's the big thing. I think their front seven's really going to be the where they make their money here, and they're going to have to hope that the back end has to feed off that. So, and I think with Shane Steichen, like I think he's going to prove this year he's one of the best play callers in the league. I think you saw what happened to the Eagles when he left. It was a disaster. Well, I mean, it technically was a disaster because that offense is loaded and they still couldn't like perform at the back end of the season. So I think Shane Steichen's really going to do wonders for this team, and hopefully that means do wonders for Anthony Richardson as well. So if he can protect himself and, really limit the bad decisions and things like that, I think this team could be really good. But again, we just don't know because we just haven't seen Anthony Richardson play. So, but I'm excited for this team. They have a lot of upside.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Because if you look at the offense, it's built for Anthony Richardson to succeed. You got one of the best running backs in Jonathan Taylor. You got a star on the rise of Michael Pittman. You have Josh Downs. You have Alec Pierce. You drafted Adonai Mitchell. You have quality starters on your offensive line. The problem is you have to make sure Anthony Richardson stays healthy because, yeah, Joe Flacco came off his couch and helped Cleveland get to the playoffs, but you really think he's going to be able to do that in this offense? I sure hope he can. Like, hypothetically, I mean, like, if the situation presents itself, hopefully Joe Flacco can do what Gardner Minshew did. But if Gardner Minshew can nearly take them to the playoffs, Anthony Richardson has to get them there because he was the 4th overall pick. And, I mean, this is what the Colts drafted him for, to make sure that they weren't the punching bag that they were 2 years ago and Matt Ryan and Frank Reich's final seasons in the league. So that's something with, or at least with the team. So obviously, offensively, the quarterback is the biggest X factor. And I agree with what you said about your defense. You know, the D line is going to be their main strength. You got DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, Grover Stewart. They drafted Laiatu Latu in the first round. So he's definitely someone that is hopefully has to have like a big impact. And they still have, you know, a couple of studs like Samson Ebukon and Dio Adeyingbo. I think that's how you say it. And obviously, you got a linebacker duo of Zaire Franklin and AJ Speed that, you know, can come up with a lot of tackles, but they got to be a lot better, you know, at stopping the run. And maybe the extra strength on the defensive line can maybe bolster that a little bit. But I don't think I could say anything else about what you said about the secondary. You know, you got Kenny Moore and Julian Blackmon. You have Juju Brents, who showed a lot of promise. But at the same time, like you said, it doesn't have too much depth. And I think for this Colts defense to really take a huge leap, it's got to be the back end that really makes a name for themselves. Because if you can't get enough pressure, then you're going to get exposed one way or the other. And if Anthony Richardson doesn't stay healthy or doesn't develop, then you're in a way bigger bind. So Shane Steichen is a hell of a coach. They got plenty of talent on both sides of the ball, but it comes down to A, the secondary, and B, and most importantly, how your quarterback plays. Or else, you know, they're never going to be able to, you know, get themselves into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty much in agreement there on the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really want to waste too much time on my response, but what do you expect for Anthony Richardson this year after the small? I know it was a small sample size, but
yeah, I mean, I feel like that's one of the toughest questions to answer in the league right now, right? Because like he showed flashes last year, but you know, we got to see. You know, he went toe to toe with Matthew Stafford in a game. I think that was the big thing with him, and
yeah,
that really
he
showed.
only came back from a 23-0 deficit too.
Yeah, but like we have to see consistency because they were in that 20-point deficit for a reason, right? Like he definitely wasn't perfect, and I think like you don't expect that he was a rookie, and we knew coming into the league he was raw, so it was like no one's like. You know, no one's saying like, oh, he's like not going to be good. We're just saying like
the athleticism's there. It's just how can he do throwing the football?
Yeah, and like we know he has the arm talent too, so it's like really just putting everything together for him. I think what I would expect, I mean, he's going to be super efficient on the ground. Like he's going to be a great fantasy quarterback. I think that is the one thing I will. If he stays healthy, he's going to be a great fantasy quarterback. I think it's just with him, is he going to be like a consistent top passer? I'm not saying he's. I genuinely don't know, but I think the one thing is my expectation is that he's going to be one of the. I think if he plays all 17 games, I think he's going to be like a top 3 rushing quarterback in terms of yardage. So, yeah, I think that's one thing I can expect from Anthony Richardson, just because he's so lethal on the ground. It's like his build and just like his speed is insane. So I think that's what I would go expectations wise.
Yeah. I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs like not this year, because I think, like we both said, they still have a lot of answers that they they have a lot of things that they really need to fix and for them to get better at. I think, are you in the same boat?
Yeah. No, I think they could if Anthony Richardson really takes that leap, but I think right now, I mean, I probably wouldn't have them play just because they're in the AFC too. Like it's a tough spot to be in, unless he has like this Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson type leap. Anthony Richardson, it'd be tough just because it's not like they have a lot of studs on their defense. Like they're really solid unit and well coached, but like I don't know. I do agree with you on that. I don't really see them as like a like shoe-in playoff team at the moment, but they could. They definitely could.
They definitely could. I feel like they're in this. I wouldn't say they're in the exact same boat as the Jaguars, but it's a little similar to the point where you have all these pieces and you have a lot of potential, but it's just, can you really put it together and make sure that things connect at the perfect time? So that's what I would say. I think we're good, right, on the Colts? Anything else
Yep.
we need to bring up?
No, I think we pretty much hit it. I think they're just a team that we really just need to see. Like it's hard to evaluate at this point.
Right. All right. Last but not least, let's go to the Tennessee Titans. Definitely a team that really could go either way, in my opinion. They're either going to be a surprise playoff team because of the pieces that they have, or they're going to miss the playoffs, struggle early on, but then click at the right time thanks to, continuity and development and patience and time. So they're not really rebuilding, even though they have a new quarterback and a head coach. I feel like they're just adjusting and trying to get off to a fresh start. I mean, obviously losing Mike Vrabel was definitely a blow, but I think Brian Callahan is going to do a hell of a job with this offense if Will Levis ends up being a promising starting quarterback, because he should have been taken in the first round if you really think about it. And the Titans were able to pretty much get him out of their laps. And hopefully he ends up taking that next step. And when you look at the offense around him, he should do fairly well. Well, some things well. I mean, obviously you lost Derrick Henry and you replace it with somewhat of a downgraded Tony Pollard, who, when he's healthy, he is definitely a capable running back. It's just that last year, coming off of that serious ankle injury in the playoffs, he didn't really look like himself. So you have to really understand like how he's going to do. But I am interested to see how Tyjae Spears does, because yeah, I thought of him as more of a receiving back, but if he really has a breakout season, then he is going to be a very dangerous player to watch. And the passing group on paper, if this was 2019, I feel like it would be the scariest in the league. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley alone should be exciting to watch, but both of them are heading into the twilights of their careers. They obviously can still play at a solid level, and for a quarterback like Will Levis, they are two options that you would love to have for a second-year guy, but it's just, it really comes down to the rest of the depth stepping up. I mean, you got Nick Westbrook-Akina, you got Chigoziem Okonkwo. They just signed Tyler Boyd to be their third option. But the biggest question mark I have is with their offensive line, because I understand that they drafted J.C. Latham. They got Skoronski last year. So you're trying to improve that as much as possible, but it just still lacks so much interior depth. And when you saw how terrible they played last year, I just don't know how much better it's going to get, even with a second-year guy and a rookie as your starting tackles. Even if they end up being like the next Andrew Thomas or Joe Thomas. I know those were a little bit reaches, but the point is you have to make sure that they completely turn the page. Defensively, I think under Denard Wilson, I think they're going to be a pretty solid unit. I'm not going to go top 10 just yet because, these new additions have to fit into this scheme so well. But, the front seven is going to be solid. They got Jeffrey Simmons. They have Harold Landry. Obviously, they lost Danico Autry and Azeez Al-Shire. But I think at the same time, their strength is going to come from that front. And you also drafted Devontae Sweat. And they signed Arden Key, who is definitely a decent swing edge rusher. And their linebacking core, it's interesting because, I mean, Jack Gibbons showed tremendous promise, and I don't know how much Kenneth Murray Jr. is going to do, but listen, if there's one thing that Tennessee can do with their front seven, it's stop the run and make sure that you do okay in the red zone. Their secondary, though, I think is going to be their biggest improvement. They signed Chidobe Awuzie. They traded for L'Jarius Sneed. So your corner tandem is there, and it gives Amani Hooker, Elijah Molden more room in the back end at safety to make sure that they actually develop into the pieces that they need to. So, again, I think it's too early to say that they're going to be like one of the most improved defenses in the league because they need a lot of things to go right. But I think it's going to be a pretty good unit, and I don't think it's going to be their biggest liability, at least not the way that it has been over the last couple of seasons. So I don't see them making the playoffs just yet. You got to see how Will Levis develops. You have to see what Brian Callahan can do with this offense. This offensive line is still a train wreck. Callahan is almost in the same situation that he just left. Only difference is Cincinnati has way more talent on their side, and the fourth thing is you got to make sure that Tennessee's new additions pan out well. But I think that it's going to be I think it's going to be a decent season for them. I'll leave it like that.
Man, I kind of love this team. I don't know why, but like it has a very similar feel to when the Bills were going into the second season of Josh Allen. Very similar, in my opinion. I think that Bills team is obviously a little better, maybe though. Like I don't know for sure because you move off a guy in Ryan Tannehill who, was he awful? No, but like same reason with Tyrod Taylor. Like you want to hedge your bets on a guy who has like franchise altering talent, and Will Levis does. Like his arm talent is, I mean, just he has that like, Aaron Rodgers like flick of the wrist like ability to just like push a ball down the field like with ease. Like it doesn't even look like he's stepping into it. He can throw a 50-yard ball and just like he just like tossed it. Like it's like tossed it like playing frisbee with his dog. It's like insane. How capable of his just throwing the deep ball. We saw that in his first game against the Falcons, who, by the way, the Falcons were a good defense, and
they were
diced up for like 4 or 5 touchdowns. And DeAndre Hopkins really had that breakout game with the Titans. Like that was like really.
But since then, it's just been okay.
Yeah, but he was a rookie, and also like that offensive line was really bad, which I think is going to be the biggest weakness of this team, or could be the reason why this team won't succeed if it doesn't. But I think this defense is so improved. You get out and get 2 starting level corners. I mean, L'Jarius Sneed, really good player. Chidobe Awuzie, he's not going to be the number 1 option, so that might be a little better. And I think he showed really good year a few years ago. He hasn't played as great, but I mean he's still a solid corner, and he's going to be your cornerback too. And then, like you mentioned, it's going to make it so much easier for the other guys in the back end, like the safeties. Their linebackers, I like Gibbons a lot. He had a good season last year, but Kenneth Murray, kind of got. I don't know. I don't know if they're planning on starting him, but I feel like looking at the depth chart, like it doesn't really feel like they have another option. So, but I mean, linebacker might be their weakness on defense, but I'd rather that than like defensive line because their defensive line has a chance to be really stacked. I mean, they have Sebastian Joseph Day, who's he's just like a solid all-around defense player in this league. He bounces around teams, and he's always really, really a solid plug-in guy. But then you get Tavondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons is one of the most underrated players in the league, in my opinion. Top 10 defensive lineman, or top 10 nose tackle, or interior defense, whatever you want to call him, because he's so athletic for just a guy that can play on the interior. So I think that's huge with him. And I wouldn't even call – that's actually wrong. I wouldn't even call Jeffrey Simmons a nose tackle, to be completely honest, because Tavondre Sweat's going to take over that role anyway.
That's what I think.
And the receiving room, I like better than most. I think DeAndre Hopkins kind of gets thrown around as this washed-up player, but DeAndre Hopkins is still a really good player. He just went from elite top 3 wide receiver to just a top 10 to 15 receiver, which is still really good for a young quarterback. And then Calvin Ridley, disappointing last year, but still above average. And then Tyler Boyd's a good option. I think Tony Pollard, you got to hope he gets to his form 2 years ago, because last year he was really dealing with that injury, and you could tell it was hurting him. But yeah, I think Will Levis has all the talent in the world. He reminds me so much of Josh Allen.
So those are your expectations for Will Levis, just second year Josh Allen, where you saw a lot of ups, but a lot of downs.
I think that's great because second year Josh Allen, you got the year Josh Allen became Josh Allen was year 3. So I think that's perfect because Josh Allen in his second year, had some really some stinkers. He put up some really bad games, but you saw okay, we're not moving off him because there's clearly still something here. His confidence is not shot. He's still a really good player.
Yeah, and they made the playoffs.
And I think this team has
You think they're
surely can.
making the playoffs?
I think they'll be in the wild card contention. I really do. I don't think they will just
Ooh.
because the AFC is so stacked, but I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be there right until week 17, 18. I think they're going to be competing. They're not going to be like, there's never going to be a point where they're going to be like, oh, we should just punt the season. I think they're going to be, we're looking at the week 18 games or like what needs to get in. I think there'll still be a chance they can get in. Will they get in? I don't know because I don't know, but
Wild card contention. Okay.
I can see
So
it. They have a good team.
I mean, listen, if everything does go right for them, if the offensive line adjusts itself and the defense ends up turning out well, then yeah, I think it will be. I think they will be because, again, they have a lot of potential. They got a solid head coach that they just hired. So the promise is there. The question is, will they be able to achieve it? That's the real thing. But I think we wrapped up on all the teams. Let's get into the final four questions. Who has the best offense and who has the best defense?
I feel. So do you want me to answer both or you want me to answer one or the other?
I answer both.
I think the Texans have both right now. I really do.
I do too.
I think the defense. I mean, I think the offense is very clear. I think it's the Texans, but the defense is where it could get like you could maybe make an argument for like. Nah, man. I think it has to be the Texans, just because their top end players are better.
Yeah.
Again, I worry about their depth, but like their top. If you take the top three players out of each defense, I think the Texans have far and away the best, and I think that ultimately would make me think they're the best defense in the division. So I'll go with the Texans for both.
Yeah, I don't even really think there is much that needs to be said about their offense just because we've already gone into it over and over about how much talent and how much superstardom that they have on that side of the ball. And I think with their defense, it's just, yeah, I think they got a lot more top end guys. And that's not saying that the rest of these teams don't. It's just that Jacksonville needs to make sure that Joshua Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker are the only ones that are not doing anything. The Colts have a secondary that needs to be addressed. The Titans need to make sure that their offseason additions, like I said, they need to make sure that they end up doing well for them. But the Texans, I mean, they already showed last year how much better that they can get with more continuity and with more depth. So, yeah, I think the Texans have both of them, if you ask me. But rank the head coaches from first to last.
Okay, so obviously Callahan has to be last because we haven't seen him,
Right.
right? Like, so Callahan would be last. Third, I'd probably go Doug, which is weird because he's the only one that's won a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
so it's but
it was with a loaded Philly team.
Yeah, so I'd probably go Doug at 3 just because it's I don't know. I still like Doug, but man, that was rough last year. And then the top 2 are so close. I don't even know.
They're close. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough. They both have had such phenomenal first years.
Yeah.
I mean,
you got to put D'Amico at one just because they made the
won
playoffs.
A playoff game. Yeah. I'd probably go – it's so close, but I'd go Steichen at 2 and D'Amico at 1 just because D'Amico won the playoff game. So yeah, I think I'd go D'Amico, Steichen, even though that's more like 1A, 1B, D'Amico and Steichen, and then Doug and then Callahan. I feel like that one's easy, kind of, but like the top 2 are really tough because they're both so phenomenal. So it's like D'Amico and Shane are just gonna be.
I feel like we're disrespecting Doug Peterson though a little bit too much because after the travesty that Urban Meyer was in Trevor Lawrence's rookie season, I mean, for them to completely flip the script and to have the playoff comeback that they had, and for them to at least get to this point was flat out remarkable. But yeah, when you look at that collapse, it really throws you off. And when you also look at the fact that Shane Steichen nearly took this team to the playoffs with a backup quarterback, then I think that definitely elevates him a little bit. So I definitely say D'Amico first and Callahan last. But I mean, it's tough though. I mean, yeah, Doug Peterson did win a Super Bowl, so I mean. I'm going to put Doug at 2 for now just because, like, I don't really want to.
Really?
I mean, I don't want to, like, discredit what he's done in the past, but I think, listen, with Steichen, I think he definitely can elevate himself up to that top if he really just as long as he just like continues to like grow and make sure that this team gets better year after year, then they'll definitely happen. It'll definitely happen. But I think we need more time because it's just the first year. So
Yeah, no, that's valid. I think all these coaches have the potential to be really phenomenal. If Doug actually takes his team to the playoffs again, like
yeah.
you'll have 4 potentially elite head coaches in the division. That'd be pretty wild. So
All right. Who has the best fan base? And then second, third, fourth. I'll start.
hmm.
I think for the best, I think it's got to be the Colts.
Yeah,
Or actually,
I think
yes.
it has to be the Colts. They have so much They have not so much history, but they. I mean, like they. I think it has to be the
I mean,
Colts.
I think even through the dark times, they still managed to show up. And number two, I mean, it's tough. Like, none of these teams have bad fan bases. I think they're all pretty good, if you ask me. Um, I think,
Maybe
I
Houston.
actually, I didn't really put too much time into this, if you really ask me. But I'd say the Colts have won. Uh,
Houston at 2, maybe, because Houston is like
yeah,
they've
Houston
been through some
definitely
dark
loves
times.
their
They've been
football. Even when the Oilers were there, if this was the Oilers, then yeah, they'd be number one.
yeah.
With the Texans, I think, I mean, they still show up to a good amount of games. They definitely went through a dry spell over the last few years where they were just completely miserable, but now they pretty much rebounded. But yeah, I'd probably say, yeah, the Colts won, the Texans two, probably the Jaguars three, even though, I mean, they don't have the strongest fan base, but I mean, Duval is definitely one that, you know, can definitely be passionate when the team is good. When they stink, they try to stick around, even though they did dress up as clowns a few years ago. And then four, I'd probably say the Titans just because, like, they're getting a new stadium. I think, like, the team has just, like, I feel like the team has just been pretty visionless over the last few years. And maybe that'll change this year, but that's what I say. I think that's a good order. Colts, Texans,
Yeah,
Jaguars, Titans. What would you say?
I like that. It's a tough. Yeah, I think that's good. Titans and Jags, I feel like are kind of close. You could kind of mix that, but
You
it's
can
tough with
definitely flip those.
it's tough with these teams because like a lot of them haven't really had a lot of success besides the Colts. So the other three you kind of got to figure out like, and they haven't been around for as long, so it's like how do you rank them? But yeah, I think those are solid picks.
All right. All right. Final question. Who's winning this division? Who's second? Who's third? And who's last? The floor is yours.
You want me to do all of them, or you want me to start with one and then just go with who I think?
Do
Go with,
all of them.
all right. I think that the Texans are winning it. I think the Texans
Yeah.
are winning the division. Um, I think with the reason we talked about, when you have the best offense, the best defense in the division, at least in the preseason when we're talking about it, I feel like that's why I pick you to be the number one. Then it gets interesting because like number two, I was talking about them. I think they're going to be in playoff contention. I think they could definitely sneak in the wild card, and I think if the quarterback has a big breakout, they're going to be insane. So I'm going to go with the Titans at 2. I think
All
they
right.
can, or I didn't even say the win totals. I think the Texans get about 11 to 12 wins, 11, 12 wins, 10 to 12 wins, maybe 13 they could eke out, but they do play tough AFC opponents
They
like
do.
Mahomes, Lamar. I don't think they play the Bengals, but they
No.
play some tough opponents. And then I think the Titans will probably get around 8 or 9 wins, and I think they're really in the thick of the division race throughout. Then the last two, it's tough. I think every team in this division is going to have over 6 wins. Like I don't think there's going to be like a really bad team in this division.
No, I don't think so
I'll
either.
go with the Colts at 3, just because I feel like I like everything about them better. Besides, I mean, even though their quarterback isn't better, I like the upside better there. So I'd probably go with the Colts at 3, and then the Jags at 4. Um,
Jags at 4. Wow.
I mean, just looking at the other teams, man, like I feel like it's not like I don't know. It's tough because like yeah, but honestly, like in my opinion, the Colts and the Jaguars you could flip, and honestly, even the Titans, Colts, and Jaguars are so big wild cards because they're so close. But I just think the Titans are really going to take that leap. So I guess that's really dependent on my faith in the Titans. But I wouldn't be mad if you had the Jaguars at 3 and the Colts at 4. But I think the Colts are going to be their defense will keep them afloat. So I'll go Colts 3 and Jags 4.
Damn, that That is definitely a hot take, at least to me. I don't know about anybody else, but yeah, Jags at 4. I feel like that's. I understand why, just because of like
Yeah.
the extension and the defense. But I'll say this: I think the Texans are 1. We don't really need to talk about that too much. I think the Jaguars are going to be 2 because I think. Listen, it's not like the Jaguars' offense is completely suspect. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is a solid quarterback. They have an awesome supporting cast around him, and the defense has playmakers. So I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but I think they're going to win around 9 games. I think Houston will win 12. And I think the Titans and the Colts, they're going to be tied with the same record, in my opinion. I think both of them will have 7 wins, but I think the Titans will get the tie break, and the Colts will be at 4. Just because I really just need to see what Anthony Richardson can do. And I think the same needs to be said with Will Levis, because both of them have given you flashes in the small sample sizes that they've given you, but there's still so much improvement for them to build upon. And I think that looking at just 1 year is not going to dictate the whole story. So you need to see how Richardson is going to do coming off the injury. And Will Levis, with the supporting cast around him, you need to make sure that he takes that big step into becoming a franchise starting quarterback. So that's what I would say. I think the Texans at 1, the Jags at 2, the Titans at 3, and the Colts at 4. And I definitely could be wrong because this division is going to be competitive.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty clear the Texans, then a gap, and then the other 3 are going to be in the mix doing their own thing. But I think the main point of what we're trying to say is that the Texans they're for real. They're legit. It's not just hype with them. Like, you look at their talent and they've got it. So
Exactly. All right. Division preview wrapped up. Let's pull up the wheel and see what we're doing next week. In the meantime, thank you all so much for checking this one out. Make sure to like and subscribe for additional content. We got 6 more division previews coming out, and TJ's gone. Okay, great. In the meantime, I'll just let you know this. We got the AFC East. We have to do the AFC North. We got the AFC West. We got the NFC East, the NFC South, and the NFC West. So obviously 6 more divisions that we got to get into. But I think that, listen, I feel like, here we go. Here's TJ.
my computer had another technical difficulty, so I don't know what's going on, but
Oh, my goodness.
I know we had it from the start, and let me pull up this wheel.
Yeah, I tried to stall as much as possible. Do you know how to share this?
I do.
Okay.
So we've already done the AFC South. Let me remove that.
I pretty much just broke everything down.
Perfect. All right.
We've done the NFC North and we've done the AFC South. So
perfect. All right. So I'm just gonna do it on my phone because it's not working. So technical difficulties aside, I'm gonna do it on my phone and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
So pardon me while I pull up my phone. So
yeah. In the meantime, have you checked out the Receiver series on Netflix? Have you watched it?
I watched the first episode and I thought it was pretty good. I think it's crazy with Amon-Ra how he literally had like
a torn oblique,
and it was like torn off the bone, and he played through it, and he still had the season he had. We talked about it literally last episode. So
I still can't believe he got snubbed from the Pro Bowl. I completely forgot about that, but he made first team All Pro, so I don't think it matters.
I feel like that's a better accomplishment. All right, yeah. I've got the wheel.
You got the wheel. Let's see it.
Yeah, let's see it. NFC South.
Is that what it says?
NFC. Oh.
The NFC South. Okay. Okay, now I see it. All right. That should be pretty interesting. That is definitely going to be one competitive division to talk about because obviously, I feel like you got 3 teams trying to fight for first place, and then there are the Carolina Panthers. So this should be pretty fun to talk about. But again, thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next week talking about the NFC South, and have a great rest of your week, everyone. Peace.